Up next, join us for a debate between the two candidates vying for the Democratic nomination in the 1st Massachusetts Congressional District. Welcome to the first debate between the Democratic primary candidates for the 1st Congressional District of Massachusetts, incumbent Representative Richard Neal and his challenger, Holyoke Mayor Alex Morris. This debate is brought to you this evening by the Republican and MassLive, the Berkshire Eagle, and New England Public Media. I'm your moderator, NEPM's Ray Herschel. Now, here are the rules for the next hour. Following strict COVID-19 safety protocols, we're adhering to social distancing in our studio. Candidates have up to 90 seconds to answer each question, up to 1 minute for additional thoughts or rebuttal, and 1 minute each for a closing statement. A coin toss has decided tonight's order. I'll be asking the candidates questions along with our panelists, Elizabeth Roman, reporter for the Republican and MassLive, and the editor of 𝗊𝘂𝗋𝗄 Latino, and Report for America Corps member Danny Ginn, the State House reporter for the Berkshire Eagle. Finally, we asked you, the public, what you wanted to hear from the candidates, and many of the questions we've asked tonight were informed by the issues and concerns that you wanted answers to. Our first question in this debate goes to Mayor Morris. Mayor Morris, this campaign has taken a nastier turn in recent days as we get closer to Election Day. You're now claiming you were the victim of a political hit job that began a week and a half ago when allegations came to light about relationships you've had with college students. You said, quote, "I'm not going up against Congressman Neal. It's not just him. It is the Springfield political machine." From the very outset, you've publicly stated you feel the congressman's campaign was involved in getting the story out. What proof do you have to substantiate these allegations? And as a second part to my question, in your mind, was there a power dynamic at play here because of your position as mayor, congressional candidate, and adjunct professor that made your behavior with students inappropriate? You have 90 seconds.
Great. Well, thank you, Ray, for that question. And first off, thank you to those at home for tuning into this important process. And I appreciate that question. I know a couple of Fridays ago when I saw that email alleging that I had made students feel uncomfortable, as a human, I would never want to make someone feel uncomfortable. And I need to honor that truth and honor that expression from those students. But then I come to find out over the last week that this was a backroom coordinated political smear against our campaign by folks that support this congressman's campaign. Evidence has now come to light over the last week, and it's a culture of folks trying to curry favor with one of the most powerful Democrats in Washington. And I think this is exactly what turns people away from politics. It's why people don't participate. It's why people have given up on the process. That 3 weeks before our primary election, I was put in a position to talk about my personal life, not talk about healthcare and climate change and our economy and the small businesses shuttering. I will let the voters of the 1st District come to their own conclusions, but this is exactly why I ran for mayor 9 years ago, to change the political culture of personal destruction, a politics that tears people down instead of lifts them up. And I think, obviously, it's no coincidence, the timing of these allegations and accusations that go all the way to the height of the Massachusetts Democratic Party, the chair of that party that took me to lunch over a year ago and discouraged me from running against this congressman right here. I know what it's like to go up against power 9 years ago, and I'm doing the same today.
Okay. Congressman Neal, you have 90 seconds for your response.
Right. Let's square the facts here. A series of students have stepped forward. They've raised these allegations. They've also said simultaneously they had no contact with my campaign. This is inconsistent with my career, and it's inconsistent with my character to have raised these sorts of issues. These students have stepped forward. They should be heard. There is a process in place. An investigator has been hired, and a review will shortly be underway. I am more than content to let that review take its course. But again, I want to reiterate something that's really important. There could be no room in America, in this campaign, or for anybody else on the basis of homophobia, racism, or misogyny. I've made that clear. And again, consistent with my career. That's how important this is. These students stepped forward independently of me. That's the consideration that I want acknowledged. The mayor and I agree. The pandemic is important. The recession is important. The social unrest that we're witnessing across America, these are the issues that we should be addressing. But clearly, unequivocally, no room for homophobia, and my campaign was not part of this action under any circumstances.
Gentlemen, we have 1 minute for rebuttal built into our questions and answers. Mayor Morse, you have a minute for rebuttal. Would you like to address the second part of the question in terms of the power dynamic and inappropriate behavior?
Again, I would respond to Congressman Neal that this goes all the way up to the height and power of the Democratic Party, not just the Springfield Democratic establishment, but in D.C., the Democratic establishment there. And evidence has come to light in The Intercept in multiple articles over the last week that demonstrate very clearly a former student of Congressman Neal trying to curry favor and get an internship and smear our campaign. And so I, again, trust the voters of the 1st District to focus on the issues. They see it for what it is, and they're sick and tired of the same backroom political ploys. And I want to thank the countless people who live here in this district who have reached out, who have signed up to volunteer, who helped make this week the best fundraising week of our campaign, because we need to turn the page on the old way of doing politics. It's a different time than it was 30 years ago. We have different challenges that require different solutions.
And a quick follow-up, we got 10 seconds. Was your actions inappropriate, yes or no?
Listen, I am an adult, and I will not apologize for being a young person, for being gay, and for being single, and having consensual adult relationships with other adults. But I think the voters at home would rather talk about healthcare and the issues that they're struggling with right now.
And Congressman Neal, 1 minute for your rebuttal.
Let me reiterate, there is no room for homophobia, misogyny, or racism in America and or in my campaign. I don't even know the names of the students that have stepped forward. That's the important consideration here. Again, there's a process in place, an investigator has been hired, and the review will shortly be underway. I think these students need to be heard. But again, that has nothing to do with my campaign, period.
Hey,
We have seen the texts of these students
Mayor,
that have actually said they want to smear this campaign and take it down.
Okay. Mayor,
It's very clear.
we've had
The people of this district see right
we've had
through
the
it.
rebuttal time now. Time to go on to our next question. There are so many issues to discuss here in the 1st Congressional District, and let's get to as many of those issues as we can during our debate. Our next question goes to Congressman Neal, and it comes from Danny Ginn. Danny?
Congressman Neal, the coronavirus pandemic has forced many people to work from home and students of all ages to engage in remote learning. There's now increasing likelihood for remote learning to continue through the fall and possibly into the new year. Yet, many rural communities in the 1st Congressional District continue to be unserved or underserved with regard to access to reliable and affordable high-speed internet. Before the summer, families in towns like Blandford were forced to sit outside public Wi-Fi hotspots just so kids could keep up with their schoolwork. What will you do to help ensure that these households don't fall through the cracks in a school year where access to internet will be more crucial than ever?
I'm proud of the fact that I wrote the CARES Act. The CARES Act provided loans for 10,400 small businesses. I know that Westfield and its consortium is working to alleviate the concern that you've correctly raised. Governor Patrick and I worked on the middle mile, which was all federal money. But also to point out in the CARES Act, there was $400 million for our hospitals. Unemployment insurance, which was perhaps the most important thing we did, including the $600 supplemental that I included in that package. Not to miss the fact that the stimulus checks of up to $1,200, $2,400 for joint filers under $2,400 was put into the pockets of those individuals who badly needed it, not just to deal with the demands of the day, but for sustenance as well, to make their mortgage payments and to also pay their rents. What's significant about the CARES package, it's money that the city of Holyoke received. It's the city money that Springfield received, and across this congressional district, that money was passed along to alleviate the concerns and the pain and the anguish that people felt. Now, what's significant about the CARES Act, which I did most of the writing on, is the following. Mayor Morse said he would have voted against the CARES Act. That would have made him one of 5 in the House of Representatives. 388 members of the House of Representatives voted for the CARES Act. Every member of the United States Senate, including Elizabeth Warren and Ed Markey, voted for the CARES Act. All of what I just talked about would not have happened if Mayor Morse had had his way.
Mayor Morse, you have 90 seconds for your response, please.
Yeah, I mean, I've been a mayor in the trenches working with my constituents through this pandemic over the last several months. And while Congressman Neal is in Washington, I'm seeing young people and children and families go hungry. The fact that folks in power in Washington think that a one-time payment of $1,200 is enough for all of you at home, $1,200? When Congressman Neal helped craft legislation that created a $500 billion slush fund for corporations? I mean, why go to Washington if you're not going to use your power for the people of this district? I mean, when we had to close schools, as a country and as a community, the first question we ask ourselves, how are our kids going to eat? I mean, what an indictment on this society and government. In Holyoke, we have given out tens of thousands of meals to needy families. We had students and families without internet and devices at home. We passed out 2,000 laptops to kids that don't have devices at home. The city, not the federal government, is providing 6 months of free internet to any family at home that doesn't have access to internet. And let's talk about broadband and folks in the rural parts of this district and in the hill towns. Congressman Neal has been in office for 30 years. It's 2020. And countless people in this district still don't have access to broadband internet, very basic. And so yes, he's been working on it for 30 years, but where is it? Why in the middle of a pandemic are hospitals closing, birthing centers closing in communities of color, hundreds of inpatient psychiatric beds closing? You can't on one hand say I have this power, re-elect me, and then not be able to actually use that power to help the most vulnerable people in our communities in the midst of a pandemic.
Congressman Neal, 1 minute to respond, please. Your rebuttal.
31 million Americans are collecting unemployment insurance rate thanks to at least the efforts that I made. 10,400 small businesses in the 1st Congressional District have taken loans averaging under $150,000 a year. 99% of the households in this congressional district have broadband. In addition, those $1,200 stimulus checks, as I noted earlier, help to create demand to sustain families. The SNAP benefits that the mayor referenced, they were included and upped by 15% through the CARES Act. He would have voted against it. It is the most irresponsible position that a candidate for Congress could have taken. A reminder again, 5 members of the House of Representatives voted against the CARES Act. Elizabeth Warren voted for the CARES Act. Ed Markey voted for the CARES Act. Every member of the congressional delegation voted for the CARES Act. Holyoke Hospital, $12 million were received. $5 million for the Holyoke Health Center. Mayor Moore said he would vote against that money.
And Mayor Morse, you have 60 seconds for your rebuttal.
Listen, our system was broken long before the pandemic. And when I announced my campaign for Congress a year ago, we didn't expect a global pandemic, but it's only crystallized the challenges that our people face in this district and who our federal government works for and who they don't. And Congressman Neal proudly proclaimed the first call that I made to help craft the CARES Act was Bob Rubin, the former CEO of Goldman Sachs. When I'm in Congress, I'll be calling you, the people of the 1st District, to craft a plan that actually addresses the urgency of this moment. And if the CARES Act was so profound and so successful, why is it that cities and towns are going bankrupt, having to lay off teachers? Young mothers and parents are having to choose between homeschooling their child or going to work. I mean, I have met these families on the front line. I know it's hard when you're in Washington to look people in the eye who are scared that they're not going to have the money to pay their rent, to put food on the table, who see friends of Donald Trump getting tens of millions of dollars for the corporations and a one-time payment of $1,200. That's not going to cut it.
Okay, we'll move on to our next question now, and this question will go to Mayor Morris, and it comes from Elizabeth Roman. Elizabeth?
Mayor Morse, you've advocated for an aggressive single-payer health care system and have urged mayors throughout Massachusetts to sign on to the Mayor's Medicare for All initiative. Last year, the Urban Institute, a center-left think tank, which is highly respected among Democrats, projected that a plan similar to what Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren proposed would cost as much as $34 trillion in additional federal funding over the first decade in operation. Given that projection, how would you propose we finance Medicare for All?
Yeah. The fundamental question here is, what kind of country do we want to be? Do we want to be a country where those with means and wealth have access to good health care and everyone else has to just fight against each other to get health care? We need a country that health care is a fundamental human right. We as a country and a government have allowed for the private sector to profit hundreds of billions of dollars off of people's sickness. We have the highest rate of illness, of preventable diseases, of any developed nation on earth. And we have a congressman that didn't even let members of committee talk about Medicare for All. And I actually did town halls. I know Congressman Neal hasn't done a town hall in nearly 3 years in this district in person, but I did these town halls. I looked people in the eye in North Adams, in Shelburne Falls, and in Holyoke. People that literally told me stories of their body being picked up off of a hospital bed because their insurance company said they wouldn't pay for that procedure. And in the middle of a pandemic, as I said before, we still have hospitals closing. Look at the folks in North Adams that are still reeling from the closure of their inpatient care there. And so do we want a government that actually values people's health And yes, the congressman will say 98% of folks are covered in Massachusetts. Well, the vast majority of folks are underinsured. And you may like your insurance company until you have to use it. But it's the deductibles, the co-pays, the premiums, the families that I've met that are paying more than $1,000 a month, more than a mortgage payment, more than a rent payment, being told what doctors they can see, what prescription pills they can take. Congressman Neal in the Ways and Means Committee killed an amendment that would have allowed the government to negotiate lower drug prices. He has taken millions of dollars from big pharmaceutical companies and the healthcare lobby, and we can't trust him to be an ally in this issue.
Congressman Neal, you have 90 seconds for your
Well, I'm
response.
pleased that the mayor has taken the time to visit North Adams. It would be great if he would take the time to visit the Holyoke Public School System. For all of the progressive ideas that he has launched and talked about, what's more progressive than caring for the poorest children in the Holyoke Public Schools? He talks about all of these things that he's going to do. He missed 28 of 62 meetings of the Holyoke School Committee as the schools fell into receivership. So tonight, for the viewing audience, let me tell you what receivership is. As chairman of the school committee, the schools were taken away from Mayor Morse. He talks about his progressive agenda as it relates to the PVTA. He missed 60% of the meetings of the Pioneer Valley Transit Authority. What's more important to people who are marginalized than transportation for essential workers? But I want to congratulate you on this, Mr. Mayor. 23 meetings of the school building committee in the city of Holyoke. You missed all 23. You're in North Adams when you should have been in Holyoke talking to the 5,220 students in the Holyoke Public School System. I missed one meeting of the Springfield City Council in 6 years, 2 meetings of the school committee. I have a job that's 400 miles away in Washington. My attendance is 96%. If you were a real progressive, you would have cared about those children in the Holyoke Public Schools. That's the essential argument that we make tonight. He is absent in the responsibilities he has as he seeks job promotion.
Mayor Morse, 60 seconds for your rebuttal, please.
Yeah, I mean, these are recycled attacks from former mayoral opponents of mine. And, you know, Congressman Neal, it's almost laughable to talk about accessibility and showing up. A guy that spends a high life in Boston and Washington, D.C. with corporate lobbyists and corporate donors and not showing up in your district to look people in the eye and answer questions. I mean, he can throw off data about meetings, but the facts are, when I took office, only 49% of our young people were graduating from high school. Not even 1 of every 2. Today, nearly 75% of our students are graduating from high school. We've expanded pre-K, universal pre-K. We, for the first time in decades, have a waiting list to get into our elementary schools by investing in dual language, kids learning Spanish and English starting in preschool. We now have students taking classes at our local colleges and universities, and this is why I'm running for Congress in the first place. And we were fighting for local control back in 2015, and our congressman, as always, was nowhere to be found. He wasn't with us. He wasn't partnering with us. He has voted for budgets where 60% of our federal budget goes to the Pentagon, goes to building bombs and war and defense, and pennies goes to education. We haven't had a new school built in Holyoke in over 30 years, and Congressman Neal has done nothing about it.
Congressman Neal, 60 seconds for your rebuttal.
What the mayor is trying to do is to hide his attendance record. If you showed up in my classes 48% of the time, I'd flunk you. The improvements that have come to the Holyoke public school system have come about because of the receiver. A reminder, the schools were taken away from Mayor Morse as he touts his progressive credentials for amongst the poorest children when he was absent. He missed the meetings of the Pioneer Valley Transit Authority. He missed the meetings of the School Building Commission in the city of Holyoke. I have interacted with tens of thousands of people in this district. For the press that's here tonight, we will document 700 public events that I've participated in the 8 years that I've represented this congressional district. And if you follow the logic of Mayor Morse here, about a congressman being responsible for the day-to-day administration of the Holyoke Public Schools, then he's blaming John Olver, who had that district for more than 10 years. The only one you didn't have time for was 𝗡𝗲𝘄 𝗘𝘊, apparently, Mr. Mayor, to blame somebody else for the conditions of the Holyoke Public Schools.
Time.
That's part of your legacy.
Next question I'd like to address to Congressman Neal. Congressman Neal, your opponent has made your acceptance of PAC money a major issue in this campaign. He's quick to point out that he only accepts money from individuals, not large corporations and organizations. In fact, one TV ad by a group called Fight Corporate Monopolies says, quote, "Corporate power is corrupting democracy and Richie Neal is part of the problem." Why do you continue to accept large amounts of PAC money? And doesn't it make you beholden to those companies that stand, companies such large donations to your campaign? Also, what proof can you tell us that your stands, opinions, and votes have not been swayed by these large corporate donors?
Ray, I have voted for every campaign finance reform piece of legislation that has come down the road in my years. I'm a sponsor of an amendment that would change the constitutional procurement based upon Citizens United. That's been a disaster for our system. I've supported the Disclose Act. How about McCain-Feingold? I've supported all of these pieces of legislation, and I think the better answer is perhaps the mayor knows who's sponsoring these ads. They're supporting his candidacy. It's called dark money. I believe that transparency is really important, and I will not apologize for the idea that I raised $13 million for Democratic candidates and have contributed to every single member of the Black Caucus, every single member of the Hispanic Caucus, every member of the Equality Caucus, and I have recruited candidates with Speaker Pelosi, helped them with message discipline, and helped to fund their campaigns. We have a durable congressional majority today in some measure because of the efforts that I've made. And it still allowed me to point out the following. If you contribute to my campaign, you buy into my agenda. I'm not buying into yours. The money is there, it's reported, and I am not ashamed of the fact that I have built a durable, extended Democratic majority in the House of Representatives and supported a cross current of candidates throughout America.
Mayor Morse, your response, please. 90 seconds.
Yeah, this is a fundamental movement in this campaign, and all of you at home need to think about this for a moment. Richard Neal is our member of Congress. He is the #1 recipient of corporate money in the entire House of Representatives, not just more than any Democrat, but more than any Republican. And the fundamental question, do we want a member of Congress that is bought and paid for by corporations, by big pharma, by the fossil fuel industry, by the big healthcare lobby, or do we want a member of Congress that is unbought, and going to Washington to fight for everyday people? And so, yes, we're not taking a dime of corporate PAC money in this campaign, because when I'm in Washington, when I'm making decisions and taking votes, you should never have to wonder who I'm looking out for. And let's look at Congressman Neal's record. We had a lot of high hopes, working very hard in 2018. The Democrats would take back the House, that they would actually conduct oversight, hold this president accountable. He hasn't used his power to do that. Instead, he's using his power to pay off his corporate donors. Let's talk about surprise medical billing for a moment. 10,000 Americans a day get a surprise medical bill, including hundreds here in the 1st District. I had Pam with me a couple of days ago from Worthington talking about her daughter getting a surprise medical bill upwards of $20,000. Blackstone, a private equity group, lobbying against this bill, suddenly became Congressman Neal's biggest donor, donating over $50,000 to his campaign. And then Neal single-handedly killed the bill that would have limited surprise medical bills. I will go to Washington to fight for you. You should never have to wonder who I'm fighting for, who your member of Congress is fighting for. And that's the kind of campaign we're running.
Congressman Neal, your response, please. 60
The surprise
seconds.
billing issue that the mayor has just raised, I'm delighted that it's been brought up. The mayor is on the side of the insurance industry here. The insurance industry is opposed to my bill. Do you know who supports my bill? The providers, the hospitals, the healthcare centers, the doctors, the patients. That's what my bill is about. I don't think the mayor knew this when he jumped into this issue. The insurance industry squarely, who has received and supported all kinds of benefits now because of the lack of electable surgery that is taking place, they're flush with money. They support the mayor's position on this. And by the way, Mr. Mayor, as you talk about campaign contributions, how about those car dealerships in Holyoke that you took contributions after you gave tax breaks to those individuals? The contracts that you've let and then took contributions from the individuals that you let contracts to? I'm delighted to have a conversation about campaign finance. I've been supportive of every campaign finance piece of legislation that has been entertained in Congress. The mayor has used pay-to-play in the city of Holyoke.
Mayor Morse, your response, please.
This is really what kind of Democratic Party, what kind of country do we want? And this isn't about Republican, Democrat, independent, progressive, conservative. This is about having an unbought member of Congress that will fight for you. It wasn't just surprise medical bills. And we just can't trust Congressman Neal. He's talking about the insurance lobby. He has taken over $1 million from those very insurance companies. You can't take on big pharma when you're taking their money at the same time. You can't take on the fossil fuel companies when you're taking money from them at the same time. You can't take on the big healthcare lobby when you're taking millions of dollars from them at the same time. And so we just can't trust what you're saying. The people of this district can't trust what you're saying. One of the first bills that went through your committee was a bill that banned low-income folks in this district and in this country from using the free tax filing service from the IRS after taking campaign donations from H&R Block and Intuit. I mean, this is why we need a member of Congress that will go there to fight for people. You can vote for all the bills you want. That hasn't actually fundamentally changed how we actually fund elections in this country. Last quarter, 100% of our donations were from actual people. 80% of yours were from corporations.
Time. Mayor Morris, our next question comes from Danny Ginn to you. Danny?
Mayor Morris, you said over the course of your campaign that you would work to reduce defense spending by at least 10%. In Pittsfield, defense contractor General Dynamics accounts for more than 1,600 jobs, paying close to $150 million, making it one of Berkshire County's largest employers. In Hampton County, Westover Air Reserve Base in 𝗥𝗶𝗰 and the Air and Army National Guard units at Westfield's Barnes Airport account for nearly 3,000 jobs and have in excess of $300 million of financial impact on the region. In addition, the 1st Congressional District is home to scores of precision machining companies that do work for the defense industry. So, for those businesses, employees, and their families whose jobs and livelihoods may be impacted by reductions in defense spending, what would you say, and how would you go about replacing any lost jobs?
Great. Well,
Also,
I appreciate that question, and it's an important conversation for us to have. And I thank Congressman Neal for voting in favor of an amendment that would have reduced the defense budget by 10%, but it doesn't go far enough. Over 60% of our discretionary budget goes to the military, goes to war and defense. We have hundreds of unnecessary bases all around the world. And I want to make sure we protect those jobs, we protect those folks at the bases, we protect the employees in Pittsfield that are employed by General Dynamics. I've met many of them throughout the duration of this campaign. I'm not talking about the livelihood of folks here in this district. I'm talking about the hundreds of unnecessary bases and investments, the unnecessary wars, the unnecessary interventions that a disastrous American foreign policy has gotten us into over the last several decades. We're talking about education before, and transportation, and broadband internet. Both Democrats and Republicans are guilty of profiting off of war and defense for too long. And it's time for a new type of government that invests in education. I mean, talking about education before, we have teachers in Holyoke that are paying for textbooks out of their own pocket. Again, we haven't had a new school built in Holyoke in over 30 years. We still don't have west-east rail, broadband internet, hospitals closing. And so, yes, we need to reallocate resources to invest in domestic priorities here in this district. And then when we think about the potential transformative nature of a Green New Deal, and Congressman Neal is the only member of the Mass delegation that refuses to sign on to the Green New Deal after taking money from big oil and big gas, unacceptable. We can actually create thousands of good-paying union jobs here in this district with a Green New Deal.
Time. Congressman Neal?
That's a terrific question, Danny. What the mayor just said is let's cut defense spending everywhere in America but in the 1st Congressional District of Massachusetts. 30% of the activity at Westover Air Force Base is commercial aircraft. At Barnes, it's pretty close as well. At Barnes, it's the economic activity that is also generated there. How about Gulfstream? It's a big employer in the city of Westfield. They're not doing military spending, but they do benefit from that budget. That's the consideration. Westover is a very important part of America's national defense. Barnes is a very important part of America's national defense. Not only do they generate jobs in Westfield and 𝗥𝗶𝗰 and the surrounding areas, but it is the economic activity beyond that in terms of their purchasing power. In Warren, Massachusetts, tiny little town, Warren Pumps. The naval threat in the South China Seas today is very important. Between the companies that you've used as an examples and Warren Pumps, they're providing a naval upgrade for the South China Seas. That's what this is about. This is typical of something that the mayor would say. Let's cut the defense budget someplace else, rather than in the 1st Congressional District of Massachusetts. That's the easy way, that's the handoff. And by the way, on the school issue in Holyoke, Mr. Mayor, you should have gone to those school building committee meetings. Maybe there would have been a referendum question that would have passed.
Mayor Morris, your rebuttal, please, 60 seconds.
And that's just disingenuous. The only way for cities like Holyoke to get new schools is to raise taxes on seniors and those with fixed incomes. It shouldn't be that way when we're spending billions of dollars on building weapons and bombs in far-off lands and depriving people of the things that they need here in Western Mass. It shouldn't be this either-or proposition, war and defense or things like education. In healthcare, why is it we always have money to build bombs and go to war? And then when veterans come home, we're not providing the housing and the healthcare and the human dignity that they need. And this isn't just a Republican issue, this is a Democratic issue as well. Because for decades, Democrats have been voting for federal budgets that provide unlimited amounts of money to defense. Congressman Neal has voted for budgets that have given Stephen Miller and Donald Trump and his administration the funding they need to separate children at the border, to carry out the atrocities in this country. And this is a congressman that came out against $2,000 a month stimulus payments to the American people, something that Senator Markey And Senator Warren, Senator Sanders, Senator Harris all came out against, and he speaks like a Republican talking about the deficit.
Congressman
that
Neal.
the mayor mentioned something about these, as he called them, similar to what Donald Trump says, about these unending wars. There weren't many people in the Congress of the United States who voted against the war in Iraq. I was one of them. I got up and spoke against the war in Iraq. Here we are, entangled 20 years later, the longest military engagement in the history of the United States. This is about judgment. It's also about showing up to cast these votes, Mr. Mayor. You're talking about me and the defense spending when you couldn't make it to school committee meetings. I showed up to cast that vote against the war in Iraq. And I will always be able to say the most important vote that I've cast heretofore was against the war in Iraq. And I believe very strongly, had the weapons inspectors been allowed to finish their work when I challenged George Bush and Dick Cheney on those very issues, we'd have been in a far better position.
Elizabeth Roman, you have the next question to Congressman Neal, please.
Congressman, there have been a lot of discussions in the Black community lately about performative allyship. While many politicians talk about the importance of marginalized voices being heard, they are still the ones speaking for those communities. How have you ensured that the people of color actually have a seat at the table? And if reelected, what concrete steps would you take to address the lack of diversity seen in political positions of power?
I couldn't be more hopeful or happy with the question you've asked. My position on these issues precedes my time in Congress. I started affirmative action in the city of Springfield during my time as mayor. I offered set-asides for public bidding because I knew how difficult it was for minority contractors to participate. In the mid-'80s, I voted to sell the city stocks in South Africa. I've been a long-time believer and supporter, as you've described the challenges we face on the basis of economic disparity and healthcare disparity in America. One of the first things I did as becoming chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, we held a hearing on the disparities for women of color in our economic and healthcare systems. It was really that important to call attention to these sorts of issues. My staff reflects the diversity that you've described, and I'm very proud of that. But I also have a long history, including taking the time to stop the closing of the TD Bank North Branch in Springfield's Mason Square neighborhood. When those citizens called me, they knew they could count on me once again to come through. The improvements that we made across Mason Square during my time as mayor and my time in Congress have been consistent with my views about addressing the issue of economic disparity, healthcare disparity, and wealth disparities.
Mayor Morris.
This is an important question, and millions of Americans are marching in the streets, rightfully so. And we need to state unequivocally so that Black Lives Matter. We can't just say it, we have to build policy that means it. And when you look at outcomes in this district, for Black and brown folks, the fact that Springfield today is still the asthma capital of our entire country, that we have disinvestment from our public schools, our healthcare institutions, birthing centers closing, mental health care hospitals closing in this district. We can't just say we're good on these issues, but racism is playing out in every facet of our life, in every policy. And Congressman Neal has been standing on the sidelines. When I'm in Congress, I will vote to end cash bail, to end qualified immunity, to make sure that police departments aren't using federal money to militarize their police department. Over the last 9 years, we've made incredible progress in reforming our department. Over 50% of the police officers that I've hired look like and speak the language of the vast majority of our community. And not a single officer has even had to fire a shot over the last 9 years in our community because we've trained them in de-escalation and implicit bias. And I acknowledge we still have more work to do. But this is about making sure that we focus on outcomes for people that are most vulnerable in our communities. The fact that in neighborhoods of Springfield, African-American women's life expectancy is 15 or 20 years lower than their white counterparts 2 blocks up. Yes, we can keep a bank open, and I thank the people and the organizers, because that's how change happens in this district. Not from the top down, from the bottom up.
Congressman Neal, your rebuttal, please.
So during my time as mayor, I addressed the issue of infant mortality in the city of Springfield. We carefully mapped the census tracts to address it, brought in Bay State Medical Center, brought in the Sisters of Providence from Mercy Hospital, brought in our healthcare department, and attempted to address these very issues. And we have made strides on those in terms of progress. The qualified immunity legislation, which I supported in the bill that was passed through the House of Representatives, addresses some of the questions that Elizabeth raised. And at the same time, we all know that the great stain on American history is the issue of race. I've addressed that through my entire life in each job that I've held along the way. I believe very strongly that performing in the direction of a more perfect union is essential. And I just want to say this. I'll take the letter that John Lewis penned on my behalf just before he died in support of me. The friendship, national, state, and local issues as they dealt with the whole issue of race disparity in America.
Mayor Morris, 60 seconds for your rebuttal.
Yeah. I mean, Congressman Neal, he had a nice photo op in Atwater neighborhood with Black Lives Matter signs that weren't even made by Black-owned businesses in this district. And so we need to put our money where our mouth is and not be performative time and time again and talk about your 30-year career. Well, how are folks in these communities doing today? And that's what I'll be focused on, less about going up the seniority ladder and more about bringing you to Washington with me. But let's talk about these issues. One of Congressman Neal's biggest supporters is the mayor of Springfield, who tried to shut down a church that was providing sanctuary to an undocumented immigrant. And as a mayor, I had to sign a letter allowing the federal government to resettle refugees in our community. Mayor Sarno refused to sign that letter. When Congressman Neal was asked, do you agree with Mayor Sarno's decision to refuse resettling refugees? I don't know. If in 2020, you do not have the moral compass and integrity to be on the side of the most vulnerable folks in our country, you are not the person to represent us in Congress with this urgent moment we find ourselves in.
Mayor Morris, next question goes to you, and here it is. If elected, you would be a freshman congressman and lowest in seniority. Congressman Neal is chairman of the powerful House Ways and Means Committee. In that position, he's been able to bring home millions of dollars in the district for things like education, hospitals, and economic development. During this challenging time of COVID-19, when the economy is suffering, millions have lost their jobs, and small businesses are just trying to survive, why isn't it better to re-elect a congressman who has brought home the bacon to the district and not one entering Congress with no experience and no clout?
Well, that's a great question, and it's a fundamental question of this campaign. And I think I've already laid out tonight the specific ways in which Congressman Neal is using his power. And I'm not contesting that, but he's using his power for the wealthy, the well-connected, and the corporations that have invested millions of dollars into his campaign. And I would argue in Washington right now, it's not those members of Congress that have been there for 30 or 40 years that are changing the agenda for the Democratic Party or changing the agenda for our country. It's even those members of Congress that have been there less than 2 years. The day of pork and earmarks are over. COPS grants for police departments, safer grants for fire departments, even the money being allocated in the CARES Act, that money won't go away. But we need to back up a moment. Congressman Neal just doesn't understand the urgency of the moment. He's been there 30 years. A tax credit here, a tax credit there, a small grant here, a small grant there. We need to actually meet the urgency of the moment. If the CARES Act was so wonderful and successful, why is it we have to rush back to Washington because it wasn't big enough? Because families are still going hungry and losing their homes. And that was happening even before this pandemic. I mean, I chatted with a constituent just 4 days ago who's paying $475 for a COVID-19 test. Millions of Americans have lost their job and now their health insurance. And we still have a congressman in the middle of this pandemic that is using his power to subsidize the private healthcare industry that still can't grasp why healthcare should be a fundamental human right. And so, yes, he has power. But we need to make sure that we build power together to change lives here in Springfield and across the district.
Congressman Neal.
Thanks, Ray. So $1.2 billion has come back to this district because of the CARES Act, which Mayor Moore said he would oppose. $400 additional million came back to this congressional district. Unemployment insurance, the most important thing that we did. The mayor said he was against it. The $1,200 checks that he complains about wouldn't have happened if he were there. We did that in the Ways and Means Committee, $2,400 for joint filers under $150,000. This is what you're able to do. And when I hear the mayor talk about what is being done, not only this, but a long history of bringing back those dollars that you noted, the Colonial Theater and New Markets tax credits in Pittsfield, the Defense Accounting Center in Southbridge. How about North-South Rail? How about working now on East-West Rail, which I think will come to fruition? The 8 largest projects in the city of Holyoke have had my influence, including the emergency room at Holyoke Medical Center, the expansion of the health center, the public library, the data center. Those all use New Markets tax credits. That's what a member of Congress does. The mayor keeps talking about the things he's going to do. He doesn't show up for the job that he has. I mean, when you consider that he's talking about this progressive agenda, what's more progressive than the 5,230 children in the Holyoke public school system. He couldn't make it to school committee meetings. And he's talking now about what he would do in Congress.
Mayor Morse, your rebuttal?
Yeah, let me just nip this in the bud, because Congressman Neal likes to talk about school committee meetings. I've attended the vast majority, over 74% of school committee meetings since I've taken office. And it's a petty attack, and I think the voters and you at home want to talk about issues and talk about showing up and being inaccessible. Congressman Neal hasn't shown up in this district. I mean, we're spending more time together tonight than I think we have in the last 9 years as a mayor of a major city in this district. We need a congressman that shows up. We have hundreds of members of Congress around the country that do working summits, that do town halls, that go to coffee shops, that look people in the eye and answer questions. And when I travel the district, the hill towns in particular, the Berkshires, people feeling left behind and forgotten about. And it's time we have a member of Congress that shows up in every single corner of this district and uses their power for them, not for corporate and special interests. And so, yes, members of Congress, we will be on committees, grant money will continue to flow, but we will actually gain power in Washington if you send me to Congress on September 1st.
And Congressman Neal, your rebuttal, please.
Yeah, what's interesting about the argument that the mayor just made, his 74% attendance came after I began to critique the fact that he hadn't bothered to show up. He missed 28 of 42 meetings before the description he's just offered. They take up a referendum question in the city of Holyoke. He missed all 23 meetings of the school building committee. He doesn't show up for PVTA meetings, and he's going to do all of these things when he gets to Washington. He hasn't taken the job seriously that he has now. Nobody ever said I was absent from my responsibilities as mayor. I pointed out, I have participated with tens of thousands of citizens on teletown hall meetings from Springfield, from Pittsfield, and in fact from Washington to address many of these issues, and particularly the work that I've done in this pandemic. I think that in and of itself highlights the fact that what you can do when you pay great attention to the responsibilities you have in the job that you have.
Next
Congressman
question.
Neal has been absent from this district. No question about it. Hasn't attended or even hosted
Okay.
a single town hall. And he knows what it's like to be a mayor.
Gentlemen-
If there's a school committee meeting and I have to miss it to be at a city council meeting, then I'm not
Morse,
at that meeting.
We made the point. We made the point. Next question, Congressman Neal from Danny Ginn. Danny?
Congressman Neal, you chair the House Ways and Means Committee, meaning you had the position to lead the inquiry into obtaining President Trump's federal tax returns. Critics have contended that you have not shown enough aggressiveness or a sense of urgency in fighting to obtain that information. Your primary opponent has charged that this perceived lack of urgency is emblematic of your time in office. An aide told NBC News back in July of 2019 that even members of your own committee were disappointed with the lack of progress. Here we are a year after that report and months away from the November presidential election, and we still have not seen those tax returns.
You could be disappointed in the progress, but that's the federal courts. That's not the role that we took in Congress. This is a case that's going to reverberate throughout American history. I am not going to screw this case up. Lawrence Tribe, the noted and eminent scholar of law at Harvard University, says I've handled it the right way. Nancy Pelosi says I've handled it the right way. Adam Schiff has said I've handled it the right way. This case is now in front of a federal district court in the city of Washington, Justice McFadden. The Supreme Court in the last month, they have offered 2 7-2 decisions with Gorsuch and Kavanaugh voting in support of the position that I have taken. This issue is not moot the day that Donald Trump leaves. I was never naive, Danny, about how this was going to play out. We hired an attorney to take this case up and carefully prepared all of the documentation. But here's what's important. Members of Congress don't order federal judges when to make decisions. This is, however, about Article 1 of the Constitution that provides congressional oversight. It mentions Congress as the first branch of government under Section 6103 of the federal law. I intend to pursue this case. I have done this the way legal advisors have told me to, and I feel very strongly that we're not only going to prevail in this case, but we're going to uphold the Constitution. That's the position that I was sworn to take. I was not going to screw this up by doing this in a hurried manner, which would have had great consequences for not just Congress, but for our Constitution as well.
And Mayor Morse, please.
Yeah, I think we all just heard Congressman Neal, that Nancy Pelosi thinks he's done a good job, that those in the elite think that you've done a great job. You don't work for the Speaker. You work for the people that live here in the 1st Congressional District. And it took thousands of people here in western and central Massachusetts and millions of Americans to urge this congressman to use the power that all of us worked so hard to take back the House in 2018. Democrats and independents that I have met over the last several months that have been incredibly disappointed in the lack of urgency in holding the most dangerous, corrupt, racist, xenophobic president accountable. We knew we took back the House in November 2018. It took months and months and months to even request the president's tax returns in the first place because Congressman Neal made it a very intentional decision when he became chair that he would rather work with Trump, work with Steve Mnuchin, than actually hold him accountable. 2 members of Congress, 2 chairs of committees in 2020, Eliot Engel, who recently lost his primary to 𝗔𝗫𝗏𝗵, and now Richard Neal, the only 2 Democratic leaders that haven't had a single oversight hearing, not one, in over 18 months against this corrupt administration. He'd rather work with them than hold them accountable. New York State lawmakers worked for years, and the governor signed into a law, a bill that would provide the New York State returns, and Congressman Neal sat on it and allowed Donald Trump to file a lawsuit to prevent them from becoming public. And so Congressman Neal dropped the ball. What's the point of having power if we're not going to use it to hold this president accountable? And we have seen who Congressman Neal uses power
Congressman
for.
Neal, your rebuttal.
The mayor's just raised the point. I am the only member of Congress that Donald Trump is suing. The only member of Congress. We carefully decided that we were going to proceed on a historic case that legal scholars will talk about for decades as to how to go about this. When I was asked before I became the chairman of the committee what I would do about the tax forms of the president, I said to a reporter in the hallway, I intend to seek those tax forms, but I also know this, quote, this is going to be a long and grinding court case. There isn't anybody viewing tonight that thinks that I'm working with Donald Trump on these issues. The first thing I did in terms of oversight, Danny, was to bring in Secretary Mnuchin to question him on why he would not turn over those documents. I was never naive about where Trump was going to be on this. He was going to appeal this forever if he thought he could get away with it. And the last point is, you can't take the New York tax case because all of the information would be redacted. That's the legal issue here.
Mayor Moore, it's time for your rebuttal.
Yeah, I think in Congressman Neal's answer himself, I mean, he dropped the ball on this. Again, Congressman Neal was the one person in Washington that could use his power to request Donald Trump's federal returns. He was the one person in Washington that could get access to the New York State returns, and he refused to ask for them. He is not using his power to hold this president accountable. And let me just repeat, Congress should play the role of oversight, particularly of this president. It took lobbying and organizing of thousands of people here in the district to even get Congressman Neal to vote in favor of impeaching this president. And again, when it comes to the speaker, he waited for Nancy Pelosi to tell him it was okay to do so. I will not wait for the speaker or anyone part of the DC or Democratic establishment to tell me what vote to take or what to do. I'll be calling you. I'll be showing up in your living rooms and basement town halls, talking to the voters and the people of this district, because that is who I will be accountable to at the end of the day. And Congressman Neal, again, would rather work with this administration than hold it accountable.
Next question goes to Mayor Morse from Elizabeth Roman.
We touched on this a little bit earlier, but both of you have said you support a police reform bill that would limit qualified immunity. Mr. Morse, the Holyoke Police Department, like many departments around the country, has faced allegations in a lawsuit alleging brutality in the 2014 case involving a 12-year-old boy said to have been beaten unconscious by 3 of your officers. Whether this police reform bill passes or fails, what else needs to be done at the federal legislative level to hold police departments nationwide accountable? And if elected, what would be your role in ensuring that those changes are made?
Yeah, absolutely. And I touched on this before. And as I said, I'll put my record on police reform and reforming our police department against Congressman Neal's any day of the week. I mean, 30 years after taking power in Washington, we have the crises happening in our streets today, fighting for the same causes, that people walking out of their homes for no other reason than being black are being brutalized by the state. We need to hold police officers accountable. We need to demilitarize police departments. We need to make sure police departments look like the cities and the people that we represent. And we need to have a conversation about reimagining the role of police when it comes to the opioid epidemic, mental health crisis, domestic violence calls. And what role should our police departments be playing? And in Holyoke, I'm incredibly proud of our department for their investment in community policing, for building relationships with people in our community. And as a member of Congress, yes, we need to repeal qualified immunity. We need to end cash bail. We need to pursue legislation that would provide reparations to African Americans in this country that are the descendants of slaves. We have never fully reckoned with our racist history as a country and the modern manifestations of racism and slavery in this country. And as a member of Congress, I would sign on to the BREATHE Act, sponsored by Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley. And it's time we have members of Congress that stand up for the most vulnerable people in our communities. That's what I've done as mayor over the last 9 years, and that's what I'll do in Washington.
Congressman?
Thank you, Elizabeth. He never really addressed the issue of that 12-year-old in the city of Holyoke during his time as mayor. I voted for the most progressive piece of legislation as it deals with the issues you've described in Washington. It sits on Mitch McConnell's desk. That's the problem. Joe Biden has laid out a very progressive agenda as it relates to federal oversight and responsibilities of police departments in terms of grant writing. We also need more human relations efforts. And the other thing that we need is more mental health experts that can help to diffuse the situation, to de-accelerate the tension that sometimes exists when officers visit a particular home. But here's the point. We have put together in Washington the most assertive piece of legislation as it relates to police reform in American history. But overwhelmingly, the responsibilities for the administration on a day-to-day basis of police departments, it rests with local officials. So we can help to draft the parameters, we can help to provide the resources, but it's the day-to-day administration that takes place. It's like the school system, Mr. Mayor. You oversee the school system. Members of Congress don't oversee the school system. Members of Congress don't oversee the Holyoke Public Police Department. That's your responsibility. But in Congress, we took the affirmative role, the assertive role, and passed the most progressive piece of legislation, yes, with the help of Nancy Pelosi, incidentally, in American history.
Time. Mayor Morris?
This is a congressman that voted in favor of the 1994 crime bill. This is a congressman that has been publicly opposed to the decriminalization of marijuana and the legalization of marijuana in this country. I was the first and only mayor in 2016 to support the legalization of the recreational use of marijuana to combat the negative impact of the war on drugs and prohibition on communities of color. And meanwhile, we had a member of Congress that called marijuana a gateway drug. I mean, I know the opioid epidemic firsthand. The countless people in this country, we have the highest rate of incarceration of any developed nation on earth, and Congressman Neal has done nothing about it. In fact, he helped create it by voting for bills in the 90s that helped create a system of mass incarceration today. And Congressman Neal wants to talk about my police department. He wants to talk about a $65,000 settlement. Well, just a few months ago, the city of Springfield had a judgment served on them of $27 million for wrongfully imprisoning a black man for over 20 years. Your police department, police officers that have donated to your campaign.
Time, Mayor Morris.
$27 million. You were mayor in 1986 when this happened.
Congressman Neal, your rebuttal.
So he's talking about a settlement with the police department after talking about how long I've been in Congress. I'm not responsible for those determinations and those decisions. What he talked about in 1994 is something to remember. It included the assault weapons ban, and it was supported by the Black Caucus in Congress, right? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It was supported by the Black Caucus in Congress. Charlie Rango was one of the major influencers on bringing about that crime bill. That crime bill had more efforts in there for community policing, and part of what we need to do is to put more emphasis on the term community in community policing. When I look back at those measures, the mayor is missing the point. The incarceration rate, if I might just offer a word of suggestion to you, Mr. Mayor, the incarceration rates in America in our jails overwhelmingly occurred at state and local governance determinations. That's where the increases took place. The federal government wasn't responsible for these massive incarceration rates. It took place with state governments and local governments, and I suspect you know that, even though you've made this argument. So the reform bill we passed in Congress was a good one.
Time now for our last question. This is an environmental question. I'd like to ask to both candidates. Congressman Neal, you're first. Support for the Green New Deal, the proposed congressional legislation to tackle climate change, represents the distinction between your environmental policies. Mayor Moore supports the Green New Deal. You do not. And in the Berkshires, Congressman, you supported the plan to clean up the Housatonic River of PCBs, but Mayor Morris does not support it because it would create a low-level PCB landfill in the county. Now, please explain your position on these two critical issues, how to combat climate change on the global scale, how to best tackle local environmental cleanups like PCBs in the county. And 30 seconds, please.
Thanks, Ray. That could be a doctoral dissertation, and you've given me 30 seconds? 27 now. So the decision in the Berkshires was reached with local governing officials. The mayor would say this, I would hope. Local officials are responsibility. They have the responsibility for land use. They make that determination. This dates back to years when 𝗡𝗲𝗄 𝗘𝗵 was the congressman and John Oliver was the congressman. We would all have shared the same view. Local government has to do this. But please give me a chance to come back to that issue on the Green New Deal if you get a moment. I don't think it's fair.
I think we're running short on time. Mayor Morse, you got 30 seconds to respond.
Yeah, again, Congressman Neal is the only member of the Massachusetts congressional delegation that refuses to sign on to the Green New Deal and still takes money from the fossil fuel industry. The Green New Deal can create thousands of good-paying jobs right here in Western Massachusetts. And just a couple of weeks ago, I went to Lee and Lennoxdale, and I talked to the neighbors and the people that live there that now will have a PCB dump in their backyard to no fault of their own. General Electric, now getting tax breaks to build a new headquarters in Boston, is leaving toxic materials with the support of Congressman Neal. And Congressman Neal took nearly $80,000 from General Electric's Corporate Political Action Committee.
Okay, time, gentlemen, for a question and answer period. Now for closing arguments, Mayor Morse, you go first. You have 1 minute.
Great. Well, thank you, Ray, and thank you to the panel as well. And thank you, Congressman, for this robust debate on policy. But most importantly, thank you to you at home for tuning into this important process. And the number one question I have been asked over the last year is, why am I challenging Congressman Neal, one of the most powerful Democrats in Washington, the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee? But what's the point of having institutional power if we're not going to use it to help the people and communities of the 1st District? And instead, Congressman Neal has been using his power to benefit the wealthy, the well-connected, and the corporations that have invested millions of dollars in his campaign over the last 30 years. And so I argue, and I know, we will not be losing power when we defeat Congressman Neal on September 1st. We will be gaining power because I'm taking you to Washington with me. We're going to Congress together, and we're going to use our power to fight for a healthcare system that believes healthcare is a human right. We're going to fight against the existential threat of climate change with a Green New Deal. We're going to fight to reform our broken criminal justice system. And so I ask for your vote on September 1st and encourage you to visit alexmorseforcongress.com to join this fight in the final stretch.
Time. Congressman Neal, your closing statement, please.
Thanks, Ray, and thanks to the consortium and thanks to the viewing audience tonight. And I would once again like to ask for your vote based upon the accomplishments that have been offered through the course of this career. About 2 weeks ago, I sat in the back of the Ebenezer Historic Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia, and I listened to 3 former presidents eulogize my friend, John Lewis. The words that have stayed with me and reverberated throughout that historic church that day are the following: to build a fairer, fuller, better America. In John Lewis's life, when I crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge with him, he spoke about the need for understanding, the need for advancing a progressive social and economic series of pieces of legislation, but he also spoke about something else that was really important: our eternal quest to build and seek a more perfect union. Thank you all.
And time is up. We want to thank our candidates, our panelists, and you, the audience, for tuning in tonight. I'm Ray Herschel. Have a good evening.